getting out of it.
Watch Hurricane 2005 in the path of Katrina. Today at 9 on CBS 4.
We now join Up to the Minute in progress.
Structure in a lot of places. We're getting food and water to people, but distribution is not as good as we want it to be.
Hospitals are now seeing a surge in secondary illnesses like dysentery that crop up when simple things like drinking water become hazardous to your health.
This place used to be a shelter. What happened?
We had some problems with children and some adults where they were running fevers, nausea, and some diarrhea, so they were taken to the hospital.
330 in all, families who'd lost everything seeking shelter again, this time from disease rather than devastation.
Late Sunday, authorities confirmed something of a miracle. After all this time, search and rescue units have managed to find a person still alive, buried in the debris. So amid all the death and all this destruction comes word of life. Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Biloxi, Mississippi.
And in our other top story this morning, the Supreme Court has released details on funeral plans for Chief Justice William Rehnquist. CBS's Meg Oliver reports.
The 80-year-old Chief Justice battled thyroid cancer for the past year, but worked until the very end, mostly from home.
Will you raise your right hand, Mr. President?
One of his last public duties was to deliver the oath of office to President Bush. His body will lie in repose Tuesday and Wednesday at the Supreme Court, and then he will be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. The news of Rehnquist's death comes just 2 days before the Senate Judiciary Committee was set to begin the confirmation process on nominee John Roberts. Rehnquist's death opens a rare second vacancy on the nation's highest court. Many are pushing for a woman or a minority. And Mr. Bush must also find someone to fill Rehnquist's role as Chief Justice of the court. The president does have a few options in front of him. He can elevate one of the sitting justices, such as Antonin Scalia or Clarence Thomas. Or if John Roberts is confirmed, that would also be an option. Meg Oliver for CBS News, Washington.
In Indonesia, a government spokesman says the crash of an Indonesian jetliner this morning has killed all 117 people on board and others on the ground. The Boeing 737 crashed and burned in a residential neighborhood of Medan shortly after taking off. Well, in Russia, in the wake of last month's mini-sub near disaster that stranded 7 sailors at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, President Vladimir Putin has fired the head of Russia's Navy. And French President Jacques Chirac is reported in very satisfactory condition 2 days after he was hospitalized for a blood vessel problem that hindered his vision.
People love their hover-round power chairs.
You made me love you. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it.
I get embarrassed when people say they love me after I show them how much fun it is to get their independence back.
I love getting out of my house again, and boy, is it easy.
You made me love you. Hi, I'm Tom Cruise, inventor of the Hover-Round. I can't sing, but I can guarantee you'll love what you can do in your Hover-Round.
I'm amazed at the people who say they love us just because we got them their Hover-Round at little or no cost.
I love Hover-Round because it did not cost me 1 penny.
Hover-Round is like riding around in an easy chair with wheels. You made me love you, and all the time you knew it.
People just love the round design. We say it's round for a reason, so you can turn and get through the narrowest door or hallway.
I love how easy it is to maneuver.
To find out more, call this number to get your free Hover-Round information kit.
You'll also love Hover-Round's exclusive pressure release system with lumbar support, 4-inch thick foam, and comfort ride inner springs.
It's time you fell in love with a Hover-Round and learned how to be independent again. Call this number to get your free Hover-Round information kit, which includes a free video and a free test drive certificate. A Hover-Round mobility specialist will also do a personal evaluation to find the perfect model for you. Call today and you'll also get this special comparison guide that tells you how to choose the power chair that's right for you. There's no obligation. Call now to learn how you may get your Hover-Round for little or no cost.
You made me love you.
Call 1-800-406-4141 today to get your free Hover-Round information kit. That's 1-800-406-4141.
It is 40 past the hour. The body of Supreme Court Chief Justice William Rehnquist will lie in repose tomorrow and Wednesday inside the Great Hall of the Supreme Court building ahead of his funeral Wednesday afternoon and burial at Arlington National Cemetery. His death creates a second vacancy on the High Court and comes just as the Senate was to begin hearings to confirm Judge John Roberts to fill the seat left by the retiring Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. CBS News legal analyst Andrew Cohen joins us this morning from our Washington bureau with more on Rehnquist's legacy and some thoughts on who might be tapped to replace him. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
Now, in your column at CBSNews.com, you highlight many of the key points during Rehnquist's tenure on the Supreme Court, and you suggest that one of the highest and lowest points in his career came within just about a year of each other in 1999 and 2000.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think it's fair to say that most people will remember Rehnquist for two things, not all of his decisions and not his conservative judicial philosophy, but the fact that he presided over the Senate impeachment trial of President Clinton in 1999, and the fact that he was the Chief Justice at the time that the U.S. Supreme Court decided Bush versus Gore in December of 2000. The high is certainly the impeachment trial. He was wonderful. He graced that process with some dignity and solemnity that was lacking from the politicians who were involved. And I think he was by far the highlight of that whole ugly scene. The downside was that decision, Bush versus Gore. A lot of people thought at the time, myself included, that he had enough stature on the court to bring together the court, the disparate pieces of the justices, bring them together into some sort of a 9-0 ruling, a unanimous ruling, one way or the other, that would have unified the country. And instead, you got this splinter decision that was judicially unsound. The reasoning was flawed. A lot of legal scholars from both the right and the left are sort of scratching their heads over it. So in a very short period of time, you have two major things that people will remember Rehnquist for.
Now, you say his greatest legal legacy is the return to the doctrine of federalism. How did he affect that change, and why is that significant?
Yeah, I mean, what's fascinating about this story is when he first made it to the court in the early 1970s, he was literally the lone dissenting voice. In a series of 8-1 decisions, the court was much more liberal than the Chief Justice, just an associate justice at the time, stood out. A conservative voice for states' rights over federal power, for example, for expanded law enforcement authority at the expense of civil liberties and so on. And gradually, over time, the country and the court moved in his direction to the point that the Rehnquist court, when he took it over in 1986, was a firmly conservative court. And a lot of the things that he was in dissent for back in 1971, 72, 73, when he first started, he was in the majority for by the time that he ended. He oversaw a judicial revolution in this country, from liberal to conservative, from the Warren Court to where we are now, that is really astounding in its scope.
What about a replacement? There's some who say the president may have John Roberts just step in as Chief Justice if he's confirmed. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that is the most logical scenario here. I don't know how you get to that. I don't know if the president is going to try to have John Roberts approved and confirmed as an associate justice and then have another vote, or whether the president's simply going to say to the Senate over the next couple of days, look, guys, we have this guy in the pipeline. You guys have begun to vet him. Instead of considering him for the associate justice position left by Justice O'Connor, please consider him for the Chief Justice spot. And the reason that makes sense to me is that John Roberts isn't just a brilliant legal mind. He's a very political animal. From the memos that we've seen come public over the past 6 weeks or so, he's very adept at maneuvering and generating positive results with a group dynamic. He would be precisely the sort of person that the president would want as the Chief Justice to guide the court from one direction or another. So I think he's the likely candidate. The question is, politically, how does the president get to that point? There's going to be a lot of pressure on him to appoint somebody very conservative to replace the Chief Justice. And then the question is that person going to be in charge and John Roberts merely an associate?
And then if Roberts does, let's say, become the Chief Justice, there's still that other position being with retiring Sandra Day O'Connor. Do you think that'll be left or right-wing filled?
Yeah, I mean, and that's another fascinating dynamic. I think the Democrats are going to say, wait a minute, we want to sort of combine these two positions. We want to know who the other nominee is going to be before we give an up or down vote on Roberts. We want to sort of consider this as a package deal. I think the Republicans are likely to say, forget it. Judge John Roberts on the merits. He deserves it. And then we'll talk about who replaces the other open spot. I mean, it's very rare for a president in any time in our history to have two appointments at the same time in this sort of circumstance. That's 25% of the court that's going to be changed.
All right, well, we'll be watching it closely. CBS News legal analyst Andrew Cohen, we thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
All right, we'll be right back.
My lymphoma had not only come back, but it was life-threatening.
After I discovered I was pregnant, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
When I first found out that Frank had cancer, I felt like my whole world had fallen apart.
I went to one more hospital because I wasn't willing to give up.
Being treated like a real person for the first time in 10 years was such a relief.
I feel like it's just like going back home.
My son.
Our cancer information specialists are available 24 hours a day. Call now and they'll send you this free life-changing video and information kit that shows you how state-of-the-art medicine combines with unique therapies to give you treatment options you may not even know exist.
We as cancer patients, for whatever reason, have been dealt this kind of pain. But there is hope on the other side, and there is great life after cancer.
Night. It's when most of the world sleeps. A time to reset our clock so we can begin a new day. It's all part of the rhythm of life. But for many, this healthy cycle is disrupted because sleep doesn't always come easy. Fortunately, there's Ambien. Ambien is a prescription sleep aid that can help you get a full night's sleep. While natural sleep is best, Ambien helps you fall asleep fast, stay asleep longer, and wake rested and refreshed, not groggy the next morning. No wonder Ambien is the #1 prescribed sleep aid in America. Until you know how Ambien will affect you, you shouldn't drive or operate machinery. Side effects may include drowsiness, dizziness, and diarrhea. You shouldn't take it with alcohol. All people taking sleep medicines have some risk of becoming dependent on the medicine. Prescription sleep aids are most often taken for 7 to 10 days as needed. Your doctor will advise you about taking them longer. In most instances, memory problems can be avoided if you take Ambien only when you're able to get 7 to 8 hours sleep before you need to be active again. Talk to your doctor about Ambien and wake rested and ready to start your day. Ambien works like a dream.
Counting the cost. Starting tonight, the long-term effects on daily life and the economy. Coverage continues on the CBS Evening News with Bob Schieffer. Experience you can trust.
This week on The Early Show, the gas price hike. Fuel costs are soaring through the roof since the devastation of Hurricane Katrina. Nationwide, they're already over $3 a gallon. How much higher will they go? Find out what's next. Plus, continued team coverage of the relief effort on The Early Show.
Counting the cost. Team coverage continues on tonight's CBS Evening News.
Texas Governor Rick Perry has ordered emergency officials to initiate an airlift to take hurricane evacuees to other states that have offered help. That's because hundreds of thousands of those who were forced out of their homes in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama by Hurricane Katrina have sought refuge in Texas. More than 250,000 have now reached Houston and other cities. More than half are being housed in shelters, and many are desperate to contact missing relatives. Trish Regan reports.
These are my 2 stepkids. This is their grandmother and this is their auntie.
Leroy Armour has been searching the Houston Astrodome in vain.
These are my stepkids. I've been raising them since they was in Pampers. And I just want somebody to help me find them.
Inside the dome, as we neared the message area for the missing, people came to us, one after another.
I'm looking for my son, Arnold. I don't know where he is.
Hoping to get their message out.
I don't know if you're here. I can't find you.
There are phones available to call loved ones, but too often these calls end in disappointment.
And nobody's not answering their phone. None of their phones is working.
The Red Cross has established a website for hurricane victims that have checked into shelters, and computers are available at the shelters so people can try to find their families. The constant search is paying off for some. Tori McKenzie thought she had lost her 6 children and fiance. She was about to tell us her story when the good news came.
You have yours, you have the cousins, you have everybody, man.
One of the problems that many living here in the Dome now face is that it's hard to find people inside, even if you know they're there. One woman told me she knew her mother was there. There was a record of it, yet she couldn't find her mother anywhere after searching for 2 days. Just judging by the size of it, you can see that it's quite a large facility. You combine that with the fact that there are thousands of people inside, and you can imagine it's relatively easy to get separated from your family. Trish Regan, CBS News, Houston, Texas.
Well, those who are hosting evacuees are among the army of people who have volunteered their time to help the victims of the hurricane and its aftermath. Some are doing their part simply by welcoming the displaced into their own homes. Others are willfully putting their lives on hold and traveling into the heart of the strike zone to be where help is most needed. Joey Chen reports.
It wasn't a single picture of incomprehensible devastation or a distraught mother or a terrified child that moved Pam Manning to begin a journey into the unknown.
This is really a step out of my comfort zone. It is way out.
It was the sense that unlike any other disaster, this time she could do something. So she took unpaid leave from work, signed up with the Red Cross, and got ready to head into the disaster zone. So what'd you get?
$70 worth of stuff.
Volunteers will get some money for their own supplies. But like Manning, thousands will give up salaries, vacation time, whatever they can to help in what the Red Cross warns are the worst of conditions.
Especially the first couple of days will be very, very difficult. You will be very frustrated, very tired.
Yeah, it's going to be miserable, but it's hard to explain. It's a gut feeling, and when you know that you should be somewhere doing something, you just, at least you just know.
Few back out. Every training class here is full, which is good because the American Red Cross needs 500 new volunteers each day. And they'll take almost anyone, even those with no disaster experience.
I'm retired, so I do nothing all day, so I have plenty of time to give.
Each volunteer commits to a 3-week tour, but could be on the job much longer.
I'm sure nobody has any illusions about how long this is going to last.
Stung by complaints that it didn't move quickly enough, the Red Cross points out this is its largest relief effort ever and promises those who so badly need help now that it is on the way. Joey Chen, CBS News, Washington.
I don't want to dig through your stuff.
Yeah, please do.
A public health emergency remains in effect in the disaster zone. The government said 10 temporary hospitals were set to open today at military bases in the affected states. Sharon Alfonsi reports on the threat of disease in the Delta.
Please help us.
You don't have to be a doctor to diagnose them. One look at their faces and you can see it.
We need help up here.
Countless numbers of people are suffering from more than fear and frustration. They're sick. Experts say these are the victims of one of the worst public health disasters in the nation's history. Doctors around New Orleans are being forced to make tough choices, deciding which patients get food, water, or medicine. Some of the most seriously ill have been left alone in hot, abandoned hospitals for days. The lucky look like cargo, headed out of town. The rest are out on the street, suffering silently.
There's pregnant women, there's grown-ups with heart disease and children with asthma that do need medical attention, and every hour puts more and more people at risk.
And the only thing harder to come by than help is clean water.
You need water within 24 to 48 hours, so we've passed that deadline.
Emergency doctors say without clean water, living in hot, cramped conditions goes from simply being difficult to being deadly.
The common cold spreads quickly. You can't wash your hands, so if someone has diarrhea, you'll have diarrhea.
Then the dehydration sets in.
We worry then about the complications of people who, out of severe thirst, will take in water that's unsafe and cause all kinds of disease.
Dr. Erwin Redletter is headed to the Gulf Coast to help. He's been responding to major medical disasters around the world for 30 years. He says he's never seen anything like New Orleans.
I'm actually stunned to see the slowness of getting sufficient resources into this community.
Have we failed?
We will look back in this with great remorse, and it is a shame for the people that will lose. But more importantly, what lessons will we take out of this so this never again happens in the United States of America?
CBS's Sharon Alfonsi reporting. This is CBS News Up to the Minute.
Now a little number from Betty Bond. Betty Bond's #1 when it comes to airbed comfort. Buy this comfort at king-size bed at Betty Bond's David lower discount price. And that price includes our famous linen package and frame. Over $400 worth of quality merchandise at no extra charge. This king-size airbed features 2 digital controls with settings from 0 to 100.
Soft to hard.
When it comes to slumber, Betty Bond's got your number. With yours, same-day delivery available. Buy at a Betty Bond near you. In Florida, Boynton Beach, Tamarack, West Palm Beach, Deerfield, and Davie.
Free?
Free?
You're giving it away free.
Hi, I'm Rob Graham, the president of Vital Basics, and I want to give you a bottle of Focus Factor, one of our best-selling supplements, absolutely free. Why would we give away a free bottle of Focus Factor? Because we know that if you try it, you'll buy it. Focus Factor contains nutrients that work with your natural brain chemistry to support focus, concentration, and memory.
Focus Factor is now available at Walgreens and CVS Pharmacy, but if you call now, you can try it free.
Simply call the number on the bottom of your screen, and we'll send you a full-size bottle of Focus Factor, a $75 value, absolutely free. You simply provide $4.95 to help cover the cost of shipping.
They let you try it free? It must be good.
You know, I've been taking Focus Factor since we introduced it over 2.5 years ago, and I wouldn't work a day without it.
Buy it at Walgreens and CVS Pharmacy, or call now and try it free. Call 1-800-262-1762.
Hi, I'm Larry Coker for Evenings Delight. For the absolute best selection and prices on barbecue grills, fireplaces, and hot tubs, go where I shop, Evenings Delight. Come in today for great holiday specials. Oh, Evenings Delight delivers too.
Urgent. Employee pricing plus. Save up to $67.38 on Pacifica. Save up to $71.31 on Town and Country. Employee pricing plus at Day Jeep Chrysler. Southwest 158th Street and US 1.
Well, it may be hard to find a lot of hope in the city of New Orleans these days. Thousands of residents are believed to be trapped on rooftops and in attics now 1 full week after Hurricane Katrina came ashore. The huge pumps that can move large quantities of water out of the city streets were damaged by the storm and could take up to a week to fix. Still, in the long term, the people of New Orleans may have a lot to look forward to. Bob Orr reports.
Even in this landscape of destruction and flood of despair,
put the pumps on. Get the water out.
There is a growing resolve.
We're going to rebuild. We are a good, strong, sturdy people.
But can all of the pieces that were New Orleans be put back together? And will the essence of this city, its people, choose to rebuild their lives here?
There's a level of attachment to places that people have at a very deep emotional level that even a destroyed place is worth returning to as soon as possible.
Lawrence Vail, who studies rebuilt cities at MIT, says New Orleans can find hope in history. Galveston, Texas.
Oh, it was a awful thing. You want me to tell you, but no tongue can tell it.
The Great Hurricane of 1900 killed more than 6,000 people. But Galveston was rebuilt on the same spot. Engineers strengthened the levees and elevated the city.
My dad said, stay together. We're all going down together.
Ted Huggins thought the great earthquake and fire that destroyed San Francisco in 1906 was the end of the world. 490 city blocks were leveled and 300,000 people left homeless. But rebuilding was never a question in San Francisco. Or in Chicago, where the Great Fire of 1871 destroyed 18,000 buildings. Now there's New Orleans. Can it be done?
Yes, it can be done.
How quickly?
You're talking at minimum 5 years before you have this city as vital as it is today.
I have a wonderful photo that I like to look at. It's an outdoor classroom in Hiroshima in 1946. People sitting there amidst the rubble, starting up school again. And when I look at that photograph, I think anything is possible.
There will be debates about how much to spend and how best to protect the city and its people from the next storm. But history assures us New Orleans will be back. Bob Orr, CBS News, Washington.
And we thank you for joining us this half hour. This is CBS News Up to the Minute.
Experience CBS News.
Now on CBS News, up to the minute.
Mom's scared. Somebody push her in the water.
The death toll from Katrina climbs as President Bush prepares for another visit.
So help me God. My congratulations.
And remembering the late Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, William Rehnquist. Good morning. This is CBS News Up to the Minute. I'm Jackie Reed in for Melissa McDermott. Well, President Bush heads back to the Gulf Coast this morning to see again the disaster left by Hurricane Katrina. The trip comes amid growing criticism of the president's handling of the catastrophe, both before and after the storm hit. The White House and Republican-controlled Congress have repeatedly cut flood control funding for New Orleans. This year alone, the budget for shoring up the levees was slashed by $71 million. Some on Capitol Hill are critical of FEMA Director Michael Brown, who prior to his appointment by President Bush had no experience in handling emergencies. He previously worked for the International Arabian Horse Association.
We're still in the middle of this crisis, and whatever idiots are in charge at the top that have done this to us, that have committed these inhumane acts to us, those people need to come forward, be identified, and they need to be fired. They have to be fired now so that the idiocy can stop, the inhumanity can stop, and somebody with common sense and courage can come in here and do the right thing. Please.
Broussard says the Washington bureaucracy has, in his words, committed murder. While rescue efforts continue, searchers have finally begun to collect the dead bodies that are floating in the streets or trapped in flooded or collapsed homes and buildings. The Secretary of Homeland Security expects the toll to reach into the thousands.
Let me be clear, we're going to have to go house to house in this city. We're going to have to check every single place to find people who may be alive in need of assistance.
The governor of Texas says his state is out of room, and after taking in 250,000 evacuees, he's ordering thousands to be airlifted to other states. And for the first time in memory, the U.S. has agreed to accept disaster relief from the United Nations. On the streets of New Orleans, police got into a gunfight with a pack of suspected looters. CBS's Susan Roberts has more.
Just when this ravaged city seemed to be making progress, a band of gunmen turned this bridge repair into a crime scene.
Just today, I think we've shot 7 people. I think we've killed 5 people, all with weapons.
Police say the men they shot had opened fire on a group of Army contractors. None of them was hurt, but it was a black eye on a day that otherwise appeared hopeful. Buses continue to move hurricane victims out. At the airport, there is food and air conditioning, and many more of the sick got the attention they need. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers patched up the city's biggest levee breach with sandbags.
The water is still standing here on Canal Street and in other parts of the city, and it will be for the most part until the electrical crews can get some of the power back on and the pumps working again.
Helicopters continued their patrols over the waterlogged suburbs, and on the ground, rescuers went door to door.
I think we are having some difficulties getting some of the folks out of their houses because they think they're safer there. This is the world that they've known all of their lives.
The state of Louisiana confirmed over 50 deaths Sunday, but warned they expect to find thousands more once the rescue teams have finished their work. This young boy lost his mother.
Mom's scared. Somebody push her in the water.
One more tragic story in a city filled with thousands just like it. Susan Roberts, CBS News, New Orleans.
William Rehnquist, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who succumbed to thyroid cancer over the weekend, will lie in repose in the Great Hall of the Supreme Court beginning tomorrow. His funeral will take place Wednesday. CBS's Jim Stewart has more on his life and his judicial career.
The Honorable William H. Rehnquist.
He was last seen by the general public at President Bush's second swearing-in. It was a role he cherished and one his colleagues appreciated. Momentous occasions, after all, were William H. Rehnquist's stock in trade. Who can forget his solemnity, for example, at President Clinton's impeachment trial?
And he hereby is acquitted of the charges in the said articles.
Or his bland announcement of the most divisive case of his tenure.
We'll hear argument now in number 00949, George W. Bush and Richard Cheney versus Albert Gore.
But in his 19 years as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, William H. Rehnquist's legacy extends far beyond the headline cases. He oversaw a fundamental rollback of liberal causes and championed a far more conservative agenda for America. Under Rehnquist, criminals found it harder to get multiple appeals in federal court. The line between church and state became more porous. Affirmative action became more difficult to implement, and the states gained more power. It was an agenda, says Georgetown law professor Mark Tushnet, who has written about the Rehnquist court, that never wavered.
Over the years, is this a man who moderated his views or changed them to any significant degree?
I don't think his fundamental views changed over the roughly 30 years he was on the court.
A Wisconsin native who served in the Army Air Corps during World War II, Rehnquist was plucked from obscurity in 1969 by President Nixon to be Assistant Attorney General. Just 2 years later, his colleagues learned he'd been elevated again, this time to Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, and from the beginning, he was a man of few words for the press.
Will you answer some questions?
No, I'd rather not. Thanks.
Rehnquist's conservative ways on the court later caught the eye of Mr. Conservative himself, who elevated Rehnquist to Chief Justice. His last years were not comfortable ones on the court, however. Physically, in addition to his battle with cancer, Rehnquist was hobbled by a bad back, and professionally he chafed that he had never been able to outlaw abortion.
I think he'd look back and say his greatest disappointment was his inability to lead the court to overrule Roe and Wade.
A case that Rehnquist trained his eyes on for years and one his successor is almost certain to confront. Jim Stewart, CBS News, Washington.
Rehnquist's death now leaves 2 vacancies on the Supreme Court. Confirmation hearings for nominee John Roberts were supposed to begin tomorrow. CBS's Gloria Borger has more on that.
There's talk of postponement of the confirmation hearings for John Roberts out of respect for Judge William Rehnquist. The mayor of New Orleans also called the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Arlen Specter, and asked him to postpone the hearings because of Hurricane Katrina. At this point, Republicans want to plow right ahead. They believe that Judge Roberts will be confirmed easily, and they want him to be the replacement for Justice O'Connor. At some point, Republicans say he could ascend and become the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but there are plenty of other candidates for that position, including 2 current justices, Justice Thomas and Justice Scalia. Also, another possibility is the current Attorney General and very good friend of the President's, Alberto Gonzalez. Gloria Borger, CBS News, Washington.
If you or anyone you know has been injured in an automobile or any kind of accident due to the negligence of another, the law firm of Cohen & Cohen may be able to help you.
If you've been injured in any accident, out of work, expenses adding up, call Cohen & Cohen.
Ask someone you know. They may have been helped by Cohen & Cohen.
Call 1-800-33-COHEN. Call 1-800-33-COHEN.
The betting barn, you got the discount price and it feels so right. You got the barn, the betting barn, you got the discount price and it feels so right. We got the package just for you. 8 pieces of lead and what to do. We got the barn, betting barn, we got the discount price and it feels so right.
Take it home with you or same-day delivery available. Buy the betting barn near you.
In Florida, Boynton Beach, Tamarack, West Palm Beach, Deerfield, and Davie.
Still frustrated by your lower back or neck pain? An astonishing new DVD exposes why most doctors have no idea what to do when their patients suffer with lower back and neck pain. They try drugs and other ineffective treatments, hoping that someday the pain will go away, but it never does. Don't take another pill or even consider surgery until you get your free copy of the DVD that can change the way you can live life without back or neck pain. Call the toll-free 24-hour recorded message now at 800-245-0956.
Urgent news. Vioxx, a pain-relieving drug, has recently been withdrawn from the market by Merck & Company after having been associated with increased risks of heart attacks and strokes. If you or anyone you know has taken the medication called Vioxx and experienced a heart attack or stroke after taking the medication for an extended period of time, you may have a claim against the company that manufactured this product. You will not be obligated to pay any fees or costs unless a recovery is made in your behalf. Call the law offices of Robert J. Fenstershive at 1-800-LAWMAN-8 for a free consultation.
It is 10 past the hour. Hurricane Katrina came ashore along the U.S. Gulf Coast 1 week ago this morning, but the White House is still facing its wrath. Mr. Bush will return to the area today with stops in Baton Rouge and rural Mississippi as critics continue to slam his administration for its response to the devastation. White House correspondent Bill Plant reports.
The world saw this tidal wave of disaster ascend upon the Gulf Coast, and now they're going to see a tidal wave of compassion.
Critics have asked why, as the huge storm blew in early last week, Mr. Bush stuck to his schedule of speeches in the West. By Friday, with the scope of the catastrophe apparent, the president called the result of relief efforts unacceptable. And White House image makers, including Mr. Bush's primary political advisor, Karl Rove, scrambled to position him as clearly in charge.
Where our response is not working, we'll make it right.
Top administration officials flooded into the hurricane zone. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld to a makeshift medical center at the New Orleans airport. And Secretary of State Rice, who visited Mobile in her native Alabama, rebutted charges that White House indifference to poor African Americans was a major factor in the slow response.
I don't believe for 1 minute that anybody allowed people to suffer because they were African Americans. I just don't believe it.
Federal officials also attempted to shift blame for the poor initial response to local authorities. And they're also saying that it's time to abandon finger-pointing and focus instead on the challenges ahead. But if there's anything certain, it is that the scapegoating on how this was handled will go on long after the last puddle has dried up. Bill Plant, CBS News, the White House.
So where do we stand 1 week later, and is the response now adequate? Retired Air Force Colonel Randall Larson is a CBS News security consultant. He joins us from our Washington bureau. Thank you, Colonel, for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning, Jackie.
So what do you think? We're 1 week on the other side of Hurricane Katrina. Are we where we should be in terms of relief and support?
We're probably 48 to 72 hours behind where we could have been had we not stumbled severely coming out of the gate. The fact is there are people dead this morning. Thousands went through suffering that they probably didn't have to go through. However, things are in much better shape. Superdome is fully evacuated, convention centers evacuated, and even more important, we have some infrastructure back in place. Every seaport on the Gulf Coast is open except for one in Gulfport, Mississippi. The rail line is open into New Orleans, which means heavy equipment can be brought in now. So we're certainly seeing improvement. It was just so discouraging to see such a slow start.
Yeah, and that's what I want to ask you about next, because I think you can explain this for me. I've heard a lot of politicians talking about what took so long. There's a lot of finger pointing going around, a lot of criticism being leveled against the federal government. What took the federal government so long to get involved here? Could they have gotten involved sooner?
Well, under the current system, the way it's put together, and this is something approved by the Governors Association, is that governors and mayors are in charge of disasters, and they've made that very clear since way back to the Murrah building in 1995. They're in charge. The federal government's only there to help. And frankly, I think that caused problems because this was such utter devastation of the infrastructure that they were not capable, the state and local folks were not capable of proper response. And I think this may have been one of the cases where it would have been much better had the federal government taken over at the request of the governor on Tuesday morning. I think we would have saved a lot of lives.
Will we see in the future maybe that law being done away with and not having to wait on a request from a local official or a state official for the federal government to move in a case such as this?
It will be looked at, I think, in the after-action review. In my opinion, it still should be up to the governor. I don't think the federal government should come in and take over an operation, but I think the governor should understand that in cases like this, and this is a very extreme case, far worse than Andrew. In fact, I talked to a senior FEMA official last night that told me he saw all 4 hurricanes last year in Florida back-to-back. He says this is 10 times worse than all 4 of those put together. This is an extreme case. In this case, we would have saved lives if early on the governor would have said, federal government, please take over for a week.
What else could we have done? What are we learning from this next time a Category 4 or 5 hurricane hits the U.S. Coastline? What have we learned here that we can do differently?
We know how we, and myself included, sometimes talk about the military preparing for the last war. Frankly, FEMA was well prepared for Hurricane Andrew, but this was completely different. After Andrew hit, within 12 hours, the water had all gone back out to the ocean, and all you could hear was the sound of chainsaws and backhoes cleaning up. This was completely different. They were not prepared for the flooding, and they should have been, because we knew this would come if we ever got a Category 4 or 5 in New Orleans. So I think having FEMA better prepared would have certainly helped also.
What about the local government and being better prepared to evacuate their citizens, knowing that if a storm like this hit a city like New Orleans, it would be devastated in the way that it exactly was?
Well, that's why all the finger pointing can't be towards Washington, D.C. I sat down today and read the 23-page evacuation plan for the city of New Orleans today. There is not one mention of the federal government. So they said, well, we can do it by ourselves. The other problem was, it's what in the military we call, it's an unexecutable plan. It said it required 72 hours to evacuate the city. Now, when are you ever going to have 72 hours notice that the hurricane is going to hit your city? I can't imagine a time when it would. So they had a plan, but it was unexecutable.
A lot of troops moving into the Gulf Coast area. Even more American troops in Iraq and in Afghanistan. What if another disaster hits in the U.S. right now? Are we spread too thin? Will we be prepared?
We were spread very thin before this hurricane. Currently, we have 35,000 National Guard troops down there responding to this and 13,000 active duty. But we have Army soldiers in over 120 countries around the world today. They're not just in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we are spread very thin. If we had another natural disaster or a large-scale terrorist attack today, frankly, we'd be in serious trouble.
So yeah, and that leads into my next question, you know, if we're prepared for another attack, you know, involving weapons of mass destruction.
Well, I think this has clearly highlighted the fact that the United States is not prepared today for an attack with a weapon of mass destruction. We couldn't respond to this earthquake, and I guarantee you a nuclear weapon in a major American city will cause far more stress than this has.
All right, retired Air Force Colonel and CBS News security consultant Randy Larson, we thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jackie.
All right, we'll be right back.
People love their hover-round power chairs.
You made me love you.
I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it.
I get embarrassed when people say they love me after I show them how much fun it is to get their independence back.
I love getting out of my house again, and boy, is it easy.
You made me love you.
Hi, I'm Tom Cruise, inventor of the Hover-Round. I can't sing, but I can guarantee you'll love what you can do in your Hover-Round.
I'm amazed at the people who say they love us just because we got them their Hover-Round at little or no cost.
I love Hover-Round because it did not cost me 1 penny.
Hover-round is like riding around in an easy chair with wheels. You made me love you, and all the time you knew it.
People just love the round design. We say it's round for a reason, so you can turn and get through the narrowest door or hallway.
I love how easy it is to maneuver.
To find out more, call this number to get your free Hover-Round information kit.
You'll also love Hover-Round's exclusive pressure release system with lumbar support, 4-inch thick foam, and comfort ride inner springs.
Each time you fell in love with a Hover-Round and learned how to be independent again. Call this number to get your free Hover-Round information kit, which includes a free video and a free test drive certificate. A Hover-Round mobility specialist will also do a personal evaluation to find the perfect model for you. Call today and you'll also get this special comparison guide that tells you how to choose the power chair that's right for you. There's no obligation. Call now to learn how you may get your Hover-Round for little or no cost.
You made me love you.
Call 1-800-406-4141 today to get your free Hover-Round information kit. That's 1-800-406-4141.
Counting the cost, shattered lives, an entire region devastated, and the whole country feeling the aftershock. Starting tonight, the long-term effects of the hurricane disaster on daily life and the economy. Team coverage continues on the CBS Evening News with Bob Schieffer. Experience you can trust.
This week, gas prices are through the roof since Hurricane Katrina. Nationwide, they're already over $3 a gallon. How much higher will they go? Find out what's next on The Early Show.
Counting the cost. Team coverage continues on tonight's CBS Evening News.
It's 20 past the hour. Top stories on Up to the Minute. Officials in New Orleans are starting to gather the bodies of the dead. 59 people are confirmed dead in the city, 10 of them at the Superdome. The final toll will likely reach into the thousands. Published reports say as many as 200 New Orleans police officers have failed to report for duty, and at least 2 have committed suicide. And an Indonesian jetliner crashed into a residential neighborhood this morning, killing all 117 people on board and an unknown number on the ground. Like last December's Indonesian earthquake and tsunami, the effects of last week's Hurricane Katrina will likely be felt around the world. Economists say the storm's impact on energy production and cost could curb global economic growth well into 2006. As Anthony Mason reports, wherever you live, you'll be paying more for a lot of what you buy.
This is one of nearly 400 oil rigs and platforms in the Gulf that remain evacuated. 5 days after Katrina, 90% of crude production is still shut down. And it's not just oil. A critical part of the nation's distribution system has stalled. In the ports along the Gulf, cargo ships are stranded, barges adrift.
They were broken loose from their moorings. They've been pushed up against levees. You know, some have sunk, undoubtedly.
The port of South Louisiana, the largest in the country, is closed. 60% of America's grain exports go through New Orleans.
If they have a problem, that problem will translate into our problem.
Roger Frey, who markets grain for Iowa farmers, worries that stalled barges could back up the fall harvest.
We can redistribute some of that freight into the Pacific Northwest onto the East Coast, but by no means can we replace 60% of our export activity elsewhere.
Imports are slowing too, and the Gulf is gateway for everything from coffee to chemicals, plywood to steel.
This means we probably will be paying higher prices for all these various commodities, and we may even see some spot shortages of these commodities.
Even bananas may cost more. Chiquita imported a quarter of its fruit on container ships that docked in Gulfport, Mississippi. This satellite photo shows Gulfport before the storm. Now follow the docked freighter. This is the port after Katrina. Commercial fishing fleets along the Gulf have been crippled. In Bayou La Batre, Alabama, Charles Rodriguez says this will finish many of the town's fishermen.
I actually spent about 25, 30 minutes this morning praying and crying. It's tough.
How critical is the Gulf? Of the nation's dozen biggest ports, 5 are in Louisiana. They're really feeling the pain there, but ultimately we'll all have to pay for Katrina. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
Part of the economic recovery effort will be to get those who were displaced by the storm back into permanent housing, jobs, and schools. As Michelle Miller reports, it's a task made easier through the generosity of individuals and institutions alike.
Samantha Freeburg's heart was set on freshman year at Tulane University in New Orleans, but Katrina blew those plans away.
I was so sad. You know, I really wanted to have an orientation and meet people, and I couldn't do that.
Now she's packing for the second time.
This is a small percentage of the stuff that I bought. I had
Thankful she's got a school to go to.
I can go to Binghamton. Yeah, I decided late last night.
That's because her parents worked the phones and scoured the internet. What they found was relief.
A lot of the universities have really gone above and beyond to really come to the rescue.
Millions of Americans in ways both large and small are answering that SOS, providing Katrina's casualties with their most critical needs. HurricaneHousing.org was set up to connect the homeless to anyone with a bed, a couch, or in one case, a home. Atlanta attorney Leon Van Gelderen offered shelter to a New Orleans family of 10, uprooted by the storm.
Everything you see in here was donated.
They provided us with food, money, clothing, and most importantly, a shelter.
Karen Rogers and her family accepted Van Gelderen's offer, which she says is a blessing from above.
We are very, very grateful.
Another online source for people looking for and offering aid is Craigslist.org, which has also been helping reunite families separated by Katrina. Michelle Miller, CBS News, New York.
And if you'd like information about how you can help the victims of Hurricane Katrina, just visit cbsnews.com on your computer and click on the link, How You Can Help.
For years, we've been taking you to places like this and showing you the heartbreak. The children whose only mistake was being born poor. 27,000 died last night. But thousands more lived because of sponsors who made a difference in their lives and sometimes actually saved them. We know you thought about it, put it on a nice to-do list, but somehow never got around to it. Even though the phone's right there and the call's free, maybe it kind of gets lost in how busy you are. Maybe you're just taking your time. But Breder and his friends don't have till the 12th of never. They need you today. And you're not busy right this moment, so why not now? It's not the 80 cents a day, is it? Sponsoring a child, clean water, healthy food, a doctor to see, finally a school to go to? It's the best thing that can happen to 3 quarters and a nickel. And it's not like you feel bad after you do it. You'll feel great about sponsoring a kid every day you get up. And you don't have to worry about Christian Children's Fund. 80 cents of every dollar that comes in goes right out to help these children. So why not now? So why not now? Know what I think it is? I think you just forgot the number. So here it is. Christian Children's Fund is one of America's oldest and most trusted child sponsorship charities. For over 60 years, we're how people like you get together with children who need someone like you. So, why not now? Call now. We'll send you a picture of a child who needs you.
Hurricane Katrina has been putting thousands of Gulf Coast residents through ordeals that most of us can barely imagine, but many are somehow finding a way to keep the faith to get them through the darkest days of their lives, as we hear from Lee Cowan.
We've heard it over and over again in this storm-ravaged city. We hope to go to heaven, they say, because we've certainly seen hell.
People are calling, oh Lord, where the Lord is, Jesus, Jesus. And I tell them that Jesus doesn't work here anymore.
There are times it would be pretty hard to argue that New Orleans had not been forsaken. The almost biblical proportions of this disaster are impossible to ignore.
Whatever you believe, whether the storm was the result of fate or demons or just plain bad luck, faith has found a following here. Certainly it was tested. Why wouldn't it be tested? But New Orleans has always been a city of spirit, and not just the kind that comes out of a bottle.
We don't have nothing.
We found Stacy Royal looking for help at the New Orleans airport, where departure lounges are littered with despair. Here, pastors wear bright orange t-shirts. In addition to everything Stacy lost, she almost lost her faith, too.
At one time, I had to question God, you know, but I knew that he would make a way, and I did get out. Me and my family did get out.
If we wanted to, we could sit here all day and just throw a little, kind of depress ourselves focusing on the negative stuff. So I like to try to turn the corner and say, hey man, we're alive.
We gather together. Those who could came together in churches, but so many of the churches are gone. In the ones still standing, there were a few still kneeling, waiting for the answer to the one question everyone is asking: why?
And perhaps this is God's way of stripping us of many things to allow us to realize what is truly important.
Looking for the divine in the midst of so much destruction. Lee Cowan, CBS News, New Orleans.
We thank you for joining us this half hour for the latest on the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Stay tuned to CBS News, and don't forget you can stop by our website at cbsnews.com, where you can find information about how you can help. This is CBS News Up to the Minute.
Still searching. Rescue and recovery crews in New Orleans look for survivors and collect the dead. Emergency officials struggle to feed and house more than 500,000 hurricane evacuees. And the death of Chief Justice William Rehnquist opens a second vacancy on the Supreme Court. This is the CBS Morning News for Labor Day, Monday, September 5th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan McGinnis. State and federal officials now agree the death toll from Hurricane Katrina will reach the thousands. In New Orleans, violence continues as rescue teams hunt for survivors, and now efforts to recover bodies have begun. Most of the city is empty as evacuees head into temporary shelters in several states. Byron Pitts reports.
Nearly 1 week after Hurricane Katrina roared in and ravaged New Orleans, people are still trapped in their homes. There are still countless neighborhoods where the water is rooftop high, and still untold stories of the dying and the dead. This young boy lost his mother.
Somebody push her in the water.
By every estimate, the death toll in New Orleans will rise well above 1,000. Disease is a growing concern as corpses have been left to rot on the sidewalk and in muddy water. Despite it all, some residents refuse to leave their homes.
I think we are having some difficulties getting some of the folks out of their houses because they think they're safer there. This is the world that they've known all of their lives.
Lives lost and lives ruined. Deja Humphreys has lived in this house for 35 years. She feels beaten, but not broken.
I do break down emotionally and cry and all of that stuff, but I don't know. I just thank God we're still living.
Some of the ugliness here is man-made. After looters had their way for several days, heavily armed National Guardsmen and police began patrolling neighborhoods. Yesterday, New Orleans police shot and killed at least 5 men on a bridge. Authorities say they were shooting at a group of contractors working for the Army Corps of Engineers. It's the violence after the hurricane and the injuries caused by the hurricane that have kept doctors busy at FEMA's makeshift hospital inside New Orleans Airport.
We've seen people with broken legs, people who have fallen through, fallen off buildings. We have seen people who have had some traumatic injuries like stabbings.
Dr. Larson and the others here have slept on average of 2 hours per night since Wednesday. Overwhelmed, understaffed, many are emotionally spent.
We know at least these people have some hope. And that's it.
Let's go now to Allison Harmelin, who is standing by in Kenner, Louisiana. Allison, good morning. You're right there near New Orleans. Byron was talking about the death toll. Have these figures really begun to sink in yet?
Good morning, Susan. Yes, I think the magnitude of this tragedy is starting to sink in. Even the Bush administration is starting to echo numbers we're getting from local officials that the death toll will surely rise into the thousands. Officially, the number is 59, but that is a very preliminary and official number. On the ground here, a health official even told some people in the area that they should be prepared that over at the prison, which they've turned into a makeshift morgue, there could be as many as 2,000 bodies already. Susan?
Allison, tell us about what is expected to be some positive news out of Kenner today.
Yes, that's right. Here in Kenner, which is about 10 miles from New Orleans City Center and about a couple minutes from the international airport, the floodwaters receded many days ago. They even have some power back on, so it's no longer, there's no immediate danger here. So thousands of cars have lined up along Interstate 10 because people are going to be allowed, albeit briefly, back into their homes to view the devastation. Susan?
All right, Allison Harmelin in Kenner. Thank you. A rescue helicopter crashed in New Orleans yesterday. The copter went down near a bridge. There were 2 Coast Guard crewmen on board. Both are safe. Neither was even injured. It is unclear what caused that crash. Hundreds of thousands of evacuees are flooding into temporary shelters in need of food, clothing, and medical care. Texas has taken in nearly 250,000 people, but has run out of space. An emergency airlift to other states willing to help has been ordered. Some of the homeless from New Orleans headed to nearby Baton Rouge. Mark Strassman reports.
Katrina's second great flood was evacuees, and tens of thousands of them fled New Orleans for the nearest big city, Baton Rouge.
I ain't gonna lie to you, I am scared to death.
Deshawn Strungies has nothing, and 4 kids looking to her for everything.
Just somebody give us a chance. That's all I'm asking.
and you need that chance here in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, Baton Rouge to start my life.
In Baton Rouge, evacuees from New Orleans crowd every shelter. Istruma Baptist Church is like many charities here, reaching out with hope and help for every basic need: food, housing, a job. For this city, it's daunting now and will be for months to come.
Now, I think the community, generally speaking, realizes we have to dig in for the long haul. We know that. Nobody will be the same. The lifestyle will be different.
The sick and infirm from New Orleans are overflowing hospitals now in Baton Rouge, which are hiring more staff, doctors and nurses from New Orleans.
What we've pretty much done is just relocated medical services from New Orleans to Baton Rouge.
And the story is no better along the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. There is little or no power in many communities. Water and food remain scarce, and the beachfront is a disaster. Cynthia Bowers reports from Biloxi.
This is a tense time.
On a Biloxi beachfront where last Sunday a landmark Episcopal church stood.
Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering.
The hope showed up in the middle of Mass, but the patience is wearing thin. For nearly a week, this state has been suffering in relative silence, overshadowed by the horrors in New Orleans.
I'm going to say it, New Orleans is not the only bad area.
And the pain here is deep. The death toll now tops 160 and continues to climb. Families that escape death now struggle to survive day-to-day life.
We're just really still don't have a lot of infrastructure in a lot of places. We're getting food and water to people, but distribution is not as good as we want it to be.
Hospitals are now seeing a surge in secondary illnesses like dysentery that crop up when simple things like drinking water become hazardous to your health.
This place used to be a shelter. What happened?
We had some problems with children and some adults where they were running fevers, nausea, and some diarrhea, so they were taken to the hospital.
Families who'd lost everything seeking shelter again, this time from disease rather than devastation.
Late Sunday, authorities confirmed something of a miracle. After all this time, search and rescue units have managed to find a person still alive, buried in the debris. So amid all the death and all this destruction comes word of life. Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Biloxi, Mississippi.
President Bush returns to the Gulf Coast today for a second visit to areas devastated by Katrina. Several cabinet members toured the region trying to diffuse criticism of the administration's response. As Bill Plant reports, the president's trying to limit the political fallout.
The natural disaster in the Gulf states has become a political disaster for the Bush administration. The president has been highly visible yesterday at Red Cross headquarters, trying to turn around the perception that his team bungled relief efforts.
The world saw this tidal wave of disaster ascend upon the Gulf Coast, and now they're going to see a tidal wave of compassion.
Critics have asked why, as the huge storm blew in early last week, that Mr. Bush stuck to his schedule of speeches in the West. By Friday, with the scope of the catastrophe apparent, the president called the results of relief efforts unacceptable. And White House image makers, including Mr. Bush's primary political advisor, Karl Rove, scrambled to position him as clearly in charge.
Where our response is not working, we'll make it right.
Top administration officials flooded into the hurricane zone. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld went to a makeshift medical center at the New Orleans airport. And Secretary of State Rice visited Mobile in her native Alabama, trying to refute charges that White House indifference to poor African Americans was a major factor in the slow response.
I don't believe for 1 minute that anybody allowed people to suffer because they were African Americans. I just don't believe it.
Federal officials also attempted to shift blame for the poor initial response to local authorities. And they're also saying that it's time to abandon finger pointing and focus instead on the challenges ahead. But if there's anything certain, it is that the scapegoating on how this was handled will go on long after the last puddle has dried up. Bill Plant, CBS News, the White House.
The first hurricane since Katrina is staying well out in the Atlantic. Forecasters say Hurricane Maria is no threat to land. Maria is the 13th named storm of the Atlantic season. Just ahead on the morning news, the Rehnquist legacy. Washington prepares to honor the Chief Justice, whose death leaves a second seat open on the Supreme Court. First, Bob Schieffer with a preview of tonight's CBS Evening News.
Tonight, New Orleans is finally getting the relief